In the era of the Warring States, there lived a samurai named Akihiro. He was a warrior of great skill and honor, renowned across the lands for his bravery and unwavering loyalty. Yet, despite his prowess, Akihiro carried a deep sadness in his heart. He had been unable to protect his lord in battle, and now wandered the forests and mountains in self-imposed exile, seeking redemption. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Akihiro stumbled upon a cave hidden deep in the mountains. Inside, the air felt ancient, as if time itself had been forgotten. His footsteps echoed as he ventured deeper until he found himself standing before an altar carved from stone. Upon the altar rested a sword, gleaming with an ethereal light. This sword was unlike any Akihiro had ever seen. The blade seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and its edge shimmered so brightly it appeared to cut the very air around it. An inscription along the blade read, "Kaminokiba, the Fong of the Gods." Legends had spoken of such a weapon, a sword so sharp it could sever the bonds between the mortal and divine. But Akihiro had thought it was only a myth. Driven by a force he couldn't understand, Akihiro reached for the sword. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, a surge of power coursed through him. In that instant, he knew this was no ordinary blade. It was a weapon that could challenge even the gods themselves. Akihiro took the sword, feeling its immense weight in his hands, though it was light as a feather. As he emerged from the cave, a thunderous voice called down from the heavens. "Mortal," the voice boomed, "you have taken that which was never meant for human hands." Before Akihiro stood a colossal figure, Raijin, the god of thunder, who had come to reclaim the sword. Raijin's eyes crackled with electricity, and his presence made the ground tremble. Yet Akihiro did not falter. He raised the Fong of the Gods and spoke calmly. "I seek not to wield it against the heavens, but if my fate demands it, I will fight." Raijin, amused by the samurai's boldness, summoned a storm, hurling bolts of lightning at Akihiro. But with a single swing of the Kaminokiba, Akihiro sliced through the lightning, dispersing the storm with ease. Raijin's eyes widened, recognizing the true power of the sword. No weapon, not even one forged by divine hands, had ever been so powerful. The battle raged for hours, neither man nor god willing to yield. Each clash sent shockwaves through the heavens and the earth. In the final moment, as Raijin raised his mighty fist to strike, Akihiro, with a prayer to the spirits, swung the Kaminokiba one last time. The sword cut clean through Raijin's arm, severing the god's essence from his immortal form. The heavens roared in pain as Raijin stumbled back, vanquished but not destroyed. Akihiro lowered his sword, breath heavy but his resolve intact. "I do not wish to slay gods," Akihiro said quietly. "But I will carry this burden, if it means protecting the innocent." Raijin, humbled by the warrior's skill and honor, bowed his head in respect. "Mortal," he rumbled, "you have proven yourself worthy of the Fong. But know this, such power comes with a price. The sword will demand much from you, and in time, you may find that even the strongest heart can falter beneath its weight." With that, the god disappeared into the storm, leaving Akihiro alone with the sword. From that day forth, Akihiro became known as the God Slayer, though he never again sought to challenge the divine. He wandered the land, protecting the weak and upholding justice, always with the knowledge that the sword at his side could sever even the threads of fate itself. And as the years passed, legends of the samurai who wielded the Fong of the Gods spread far and wide, but only Akihiro knew the true cost of carrying such a blade. Years passed, and Akihiro's legend grew, but the cost of wielding the Kaminokiba, the Fong of the Gods, began to weigh heavily upon him. The blade, as Raijin had warned, was no ordinary weapon. It was a living force, bound to powers beyond mortal comprehension, and every time Akihiro drew it in battle, it demanded a price. The first price was subtle, a creeping isolation. Word of the God-Slayer spread quickly, and though many admired him, just as many feared him. Townspeople whispered behind his back, wary of a man who had crossed swords with the divine. When he visited villages, doors closed, and children were pulled away from the streets. The power of the sword made Akihiro untouchable, but it also made him an outsider. He no longer had a home or a community to call his own. The second cost came as visions. At night, Akihiro began to dream of strange, otherworldly realms where he walked among gods and spirits. They showed him futures filled with war, suffering, and death. Sometimes, he saw the faces of those he could not save, innocents caught in battles he had no choice but to fight. The sword's influence weighed on his mind, filling him with a haunting awareness of the fragility of the world around him. It was as if Kaminokiba wanted him to see the chaos that could be unleashed if he failed to act. One particularly harrowing vision came to him on the eve of winter. Akihiro stood on a battlefield drenched in blood. Before him was not an enemy, but a friend, an old comrade from his days as a samurai. In the vision, they stood as enemies, locked in a duel to the death. Akihiro awoke drenched in sweat, shaken to his core. He had not seen this man in years, but the vision left him with a sickening dread. Could this be his fate? Was he destined to strike down those he once fought alongside? The trials became more tangible as well. One day, as Akihiro traveled through a remote forest, he encountered a hermit who spoke with the voice of prophecy. The hermit warned him, "The sword you carry is a cursed thing. To wield it is to invite destruction upon yourself and those you hold dear. It will test you, break you, until nothing remains but the blade and your soul bound to it." Ignoring the warning, Akihiro pressed on, but soon found himself drawn into battle after battle. It was as if the sword attracted conflict. Raiders attacked the villages he passed through. Rival warlords sought him out, hoping to claim the Fong of the gods for themselves. Each time, Akihiro was forced to draw the sword, and each time he did, he felt more of his humanity slip away. The blade's power was intoxicating, and in the heat of combat, it filled him with an unearthly strength. But afterward, he would feel hollow, as if the sword was draining something vital from within him. The final and greatest trial came when the vision he had feared became reality. Akihiro crossed paths with his old comrade, Yasuke, a samurai who had also wandered the land after their lord's death. Yasuke had heard the stories of Akihiro's sword, and though they greeted one another as brothers, a shadow hung over their reunion. Yasuke, too, was a man changed by the years, and he harbored ambitions of uniting the fractured clans under his banner. "I must ask you, Akihiro," Yasuke said one evening as they sat by the fire, "will you join me? With your strength and that blade, we could bring peace to this war-torn land." Akihiro shook his head. "Peace cannot be forged by force alone. The sword I carry, it is not meant to rule, Yasuke. It is a burden, not a crown." Yasuke's eyes darkened. "Then you leave me no choice." The next morning, Akihiro found himself standing on a field of battle once more, this time facing his old friend. Yasuke had gathered a force of warriors, and though Akihiro wished to avoid the fight, he knew there was no turning back. With a heavy heart, he drew the Kaminokiba. The battle was fierce, and Yasuke proved a formidable opponent, his swordsmanship honed by years of experience. But Akihiro's blade was not one that could be matched by mortal steel. As their duel reached its climax, Akihiro felt the pull of the Fong urging him to strike the killing blow. And so he did. Yasuke fell, his eyes wide with shock and sorrow, and in that moment, Akihiro understood the true price of the sword. It did not just demand blood, it demanded the severing of all bonds. Those who carried it would be doomed to walk alone, to cut away all that was dear to them. The sword had taken his friend, just as it had taken his home and his peace of mind. In the aftermath of the battle, Akihiro stood alone once more, the weight of his actions heavy on his shoulders. He sheathed the Kaminokiba, its gleam now dull in his eyes, and walked away from the battlefield. He knew that his journey was far from over, and that the sword would continue to test him, to demand more from him than he could ever give. But as he wandered into the horizon, Akihiro vowed to endure. He would bear the burden of the Fong of the gods for as long as his body and soul allowed, no matter the cost. For in the end, he knew that the sword was not only a weapon, It was a trial, a test of his humanity. And though he had lost much, Akihiro still clung to the hope that, one day, he might find a way to lay the sword down for good. Until that day, the Godslayer would walk his lonely path, bound by the blade that could cut even the divine.